the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Toulis.
Without there being stability in the law, there cannot be prosperity. If you do not have a court system that will let you enforce a contract with another party and hold the other party to it or hold you to it, then you really are going to have a hard time creating capitalization, creating wealth, creating prosperity. The certainty of law, the certainty of arrangements, the ability to make people uphold their promise and obey their promises is an essential part of civilization, Western civilization, and I would say Christendom as well. And if you have the ability to hold contract and to hold people to it, you can build large things. You can build giant companies. You can build huge infrastructure with many hundreds of people involved, thousands of people, even vast quantities of concrete, steel, equipment, you name it. How are large combines created with large plant structures, large factories, huge parking lots for employees? Well, they're all built because of the certainty of contract, the certainty of the legal system. When we hear about places such as Bulgaria and the Soviet Union or former countries in the Red Bloc, we can hear about their poverty, their need to import food products and every manufactured thing because they can't produce them on their own. And they can't because there is not a law that is enforceable, a law that means anything. There may be an appearance of law. There may be a simulacrum of legality, of courts and administration and so on. But without a genuine certainty of what the law stands for and what the words mean, then there's not going to be great prosperity. There will always be some economic activity, even in the worst run countries, even in socialist dictatorships where there may be a fine constitution, but there is really a neglect of existing statute, or the existing statute is very one-sided in favor of elites or in favor of the military or the police or special interest. Well, this is David Toulis, and we are at 92.7 FM and 95.3 FM HD4. And the idea that we have a law, I think, is important. And I'm somewhat predisposed to thinking about that subject because liberty and prosperity are intimately linked. If you don't have liberty and freedom, you do not have prosperity. And since I'm concerned about Chattanooga and its growth, my question for you is, what do we do to make ourselves more prosperous? And how can we look at certain operations of the law here in Hamilton County, in East Ridge, Red Bank, Saudi Daisy, Chattanooga? How can we look at certain operations of the law and determine whether or not they are suffocating of the human spirit, the human genius that creates capital? That's what my question is. And I have a face that you should look at, a face which I would like you to look at. And it is that of a young woman I met at the Concerned Citizens for Justice rally for Anjali Moore, the man accused and convicted of a murder and who is in prison now for, I think, about the 8th year. He had a hearing about 2 weeks ago in Chattanooga in the criminal courtroom of Judge Don Poole, in which an attorney from Nashville was leading the fight for a new trial on account of suppressed evidence and seemingly unjust and unclear machinations by the man who became Chief McPherson before, who was not a chief at the time, though was a high manager in the police department and a relative of his. So these are the stories about Anjali Moore and a beating about him, and a meeting to raise money for that African-American group, Concerned Citizens for Justice. I met this young lady, Keela Jackson. She's in her early 30s. She's a writer. She has a master's degree in education. She teaches at a local at the Chambliss Center for Children, the Chambliss Children's Center off of I forgot, off of Wilcox. Is it Wilcox? No, it's not Wilcox. It's Tunnel Boulevard, and in near Germantown. And she is in an ordeal that has sapped her strength, that has sapped her financially. And if she weren't a practicing Christian, she would be very bitter about it and blaming others. And she would be tempted to think that, well, I'm going to blame other people. I'm going to blame other people for everything that has happened bad to me. And one in a framework of thought like that really cannot prosper. A person like that really can't prosper. She's not falling victim to that line of thinking, however, and made an appeal last week to the city court to have a suspended driver's license unsuspended so that she could apply for a Tennessee driver's license. She had a Georgia driver's license that had been suspended without her having been properly notified. And she was involved in a transportation stop under Title 55 as a good Samaritan behind the wheel of a car of a very sick person, ill in transit in the worst possible way. She was behind the wheel, and a light was out on the car, a pretext for a traffic stop. And where routinely now, for decades, I don't need to say now, but for decades, that is a criminal matter to be out of keeping with Title 55. So having a dead light bulb is a crime under Title 55 as it's enforced now, especially against private users. These are the new crime. Having a light bulb out is a crime, but it was laid to her that the light crime was hers, failure to have insurance on the car, her license being suspended, and the car did not have a city sticker. So she was blamed for all these, and I'm not sure what happened 4 years ago. This was May 2014. But she has been unable to move freely and to prosper. Now, if you are a regular on the David Tulis Show, you know about the Judge Alita Trauger decision of July 3rd that said the state system of penalizing poor people by revoking their driver's licenses for non-payment of court fees is unconstitutional. And apparently, though, Keila has been unable to take advantage of a system ordered to be in place by Judge Trauger, where tens of thousands of poor people, it is almost, I'm trying to think of the number now, but it's past 200,000 people. Well, maybe it's not that much, but maybe about 150, let's say about 150,000 people in our state do not have the privilege of using the road. And so if they respect these claims, these are false claims, by the way, but if these people respect these claims by the state that you cannot move your body from point A to point B and avoid any private use of a car on the road, they are suffering financially, as she is. She's too poor to pay the fines up front, and she was told before that to get onto the payment plan means that you may forfeit the money. In other words, if you don't meet the requirements just right, you forfeit, you lose, you have stolen from you the money you put in toward the payment of the fines. I've had an interview with a similar person, a woman of color, Tiffany McGuinn, who works in a restaurant here in East Ridge, has two dependents, and she has $14,000 in fines from a DUI case 10 years ago. And these things have just kept piling up on her. And but with interest and other offenses that occur because her license was revoked, she is under a pile that she can never escape. She simply cannot ever escape it. And I offer these two women. They happen to be women of color, but they're typical of the problem that we have caused against the free market, against liberty, and against prosperity by the state of Tennessee itself. The state itself is the force, the machinery that grinds down the spirit of the people and makes capitalization in their lives impossible. And that's what happened in Keila Jackson's case. So make sure you go to our chief sponsor's website, Nuganomics.com. That's Nuganomics.com. And call me at 800-8949-800-8949. And what I also want to make note of is that when there's instability in the law, that we have what's called corruption. Corruption, as Dave Merlin tells me, he's the man who runs WeVGov.com and has an extensive course on the right to travel as well as courses on federal taxation. He says that corruption is the abuse and violation of the law by people who are charged with upholding it. I think the last part may not be his definition, but corruption is simply where the law is ignored, right? And when we have state actors violating the law, that is particularly destabilizing of the economy. It makes things uncertain. And I think uncertainty, especially when you are under an oppression, saps your ability to make a living. It just makes it impossible to get ahead. It makes it hard to think ahead. It makes it difficult to want to take any kind of risk. Because remember, when you're in business, you are taking a risk. You're putting money on the line. You're putting family money out there. You're not sure of the return. You've got your uncle, you've got your aunt, you've got your dad, you've got your son, you've got your brother, people who have lent you money or given you money to invest and hoping for a profit in the future. You have all their expectations, and it's hard to deal every day as an entrepreneur with those expectations, with decisions you're making in your field, and have then on top of just of the regular danger, the regular excitement of being in business, you have an unstable legal system in which your property is not sure, your rights are not sure. Enforcing of your rights is very difficult, very expensive because you have to hire an attorney. And that particular blue lights flashing problem is the one that I find myself giving more and more attention to as I run this show, David Tullis, where I'm suggesting that you love your neighbor and buy local. And I think one great reason that my focus is changing is because I've read Joel McDermott's book. Joel McDermott, who is with American Vision in Marietta, has a book called "The Problem of Slavery in Christian America." It's a detailed history of the slave laws and the complicity of Christian people with the institution of slavery, including Presbyterians. I'm a Presbyterian, and some of the notable writers in my world, my part of Christianity, were the worst defenders of the status quo at the time, and believed in various myths such as the myth of Ham, right, the son of Noah, who was black and was accursed for his disregard of his father, who was in his drunken stupor there in the book of Genesis, and that book made it very clear to me that my efforts at promoting reform, particularly reform of the transportation system in our state, is essential, and that it has to be a loco-centric project. We cannot rely on Nashville. We cannot rely on the Supreme Court. We cannot rely on the guild of lawyers who have charge of the law and who have not allowed for freedom, right? The guild of attorneys in Helena County and Chattanooga and across the state, they are responsible for the way the legal system works. And I've talked with numerous attorneys about parts of Title 55, the transportation law, and they are simply ignorant. They're simply ignorant people. And I hate to say that, but I'm not sure whom I would recommend. In fact, I have a survey that I've kind of half accomplished, asking to find an attorney to handle a traffic case, and I really need to finish that project to have 10 attorneys get this solicitation letter, seeing if they're qualified to handle a traffic case, because the questions are not how they view them as being the issues, but a traffic case by a private person on the road, maybe an immigrant or someone like Omariel Woods, an East Ridge man, happens to be a man of color who works at Volkswagen, who's never had a driver's license and who is now and again involved in traffic court in East Ridge. He's in his late 20s, I think. So a case like his, how would a defense attorney handle a case like that of a man who doesn't have a driver's license being charged under a statute that cannot be made to apply to someone who does not have a driver's license, the exhibit on demand statute. The one that is made to apply to all these free people from Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico who were in our country exercising the right to travel. So how does that happen? The question I want to get to with mentioning Kilo Jackson is how it is that in her poverty, we can see the effect in other quarters of society in Chattanooga. And I don't mean just Black society or African-American society, but society in general. If we have these oppressions that occur where this woman is told you cannot get in the car on your own because it's a crime to do so, and that if you do and we catch you, we will charge you criminally, and we will either arrest you or cite you to court for exercising the privilege of driving when, as they would say, but when really all that Kilo Jackson would be doing would be exercising the right to travel by the means and conveyance of her choice in a private capacity as a human being moving her body from one place to another. And that is something subject to constitutional protection, right? That is something that God gives you. The ability of movement is something that God gives every human being. The liberty of movement, moving from place to place, communicating with other people. Communication takes place with movement. Movement and communication in the law, especially some of the older cases, are the same thing. What are your communications? Do not have filthy communications. Do not have filthy doings and goings, right? It's not just what you say in communications, it's where you go and what you do and with whom you do it. Communication is the interaction, the human intercourse of discussion of society, of culture, of transactions, of sales, of business, of service to others. And the fact that we have these problems that are like Joseph Heller's Catch-22, the problem where she is too poor to pay. She doesn't want to get on the payment plan because she really can't afford even the $200 down payment to get into the plan, because she's told there's no certainty that even if she pays and pays and pays, that it will have an effect. We can hope there'll be an effect, the clerk said. We can hope that it will work out. Well, that's a gamble she was not willing to take 4 years ago when these pitches were made to her then. And so she's gone for 4 years, this young woman, very intelligent, very, very intelligent. She is working beneath her calling in a child care center. She's way beneath her calling. She's way beneath her pay. And yet she cannot increase her wealth. She cannot prosper because of the lack of $800 to pay fines to get her license unsuspended from Georgia so that she can apply for a full license here in Tennessee. And the question that was before the Judge Sherry Patey, is can she apply for a restricted license under hardship? The hardship being she can't afford the license. Can you grant her a restricted license? And when I look at the petition that she filed, and I'll tell you what, why don't you read this petition yourself? It's just 2 pages. When she sent me a copy of it and printed it out, and it's 2 pages. And can you not see and can you not have empathy with a person like her? My job as a member of the press is to put the face on injustice, and to make people who care not for justice, who are not offended by injustice, to say, that's just simply wrong. And we have to do something about it. We have to do something about the fact we have city courts to begin with. City courts are the means the police state can operate. If you didn't have city courts, if you didn't have these corporation courts where the rights of the defendant are slightly dealt with and everybody just expeditiously gets their case through, everybody on all sides are running these cases through. If you didn't have that court, you could not have the police state. You could not even have commercial government that we have now. But the reason we cannot get rid of them is there's not consensus among the victims. The victims are the people who are caught for ordinance violations in city court, and then more importantly for traffic violations, which are victimless crimes. Traffic violations are not crimes. They are simply violations. They're not moral offenses against God. If anything, they are offenses against custom. They're called male prohibitas as opposed to male in se. If you if you kill someone, you are committing a wrong in itself. That's called male inse, an evil thing in itself. 800-8949, 800-8949. If you commit a traffic offense, it's called male prohibitas, a wrong by prohibition, a wrong because somebody said it is wrong. And so my concern here on the David Tooley Show is the loss of this prosperity. And we have a city council meeting tonight, and city council is completely oblivious to this problem, particularly with the operation of the blue lights. The blue lights are in poor areas a source of suppression, a suppressive source. And we have in the news today a cop shooting 3 times at someone who's just committed suicide, and another cop who gets off because he was going to quit anyway. And the fact that he quit his job for a DUI case, that's enough. We don't have to charge him. It just seems unjust. David Tooley.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, Digital FM 95.3.